There is a single dog tag in the bottom drawer of my desk. The chain is broken. The edge is scorched where heat ate the steel. I am 71 years old and I take it out once a year on the 17th of October and I hold it in my palm until my hand stops shaking. I was a brigadier general then. I'm a retired old man now. The tag says one word that the army never put on any roster of mine, and that word is the closest thing I have to a confession. The name on the tag is not the point. The point is what I called her the first time I saw her, in the mess tent at Camp Halberd in the high country north of Kandahar province. I called her the kid, not to her face, not yet. I leaned over to my sergeant major, a man named Brock who had been with me through 3 deployments, and I said, "Who let a kid into my mess?" Brock looked up from his coffee. He chose his words carefully. He said, "That is Captain Mara Velen, sir, joint augmentation. She came in on the supply rotation." I said, "She looks 19. She was 28, she was 5'4". She had steady gray eyes and a small white scar at the hairline I assumed was a childhood thing, a bicycle, a fence. Her hair was cropped short under a tan watch cap. She was eating slowly, the way a person eats when they have learned not to waste fuel. She had her tray squared to the edge of the table the way an instructor squares a tray. I did not see any of that then. I saw a small woman in a uniform a size too generous, sitting alone at a table of staff officers who had moved themselves 2 benches down. The mess at Halberd was a long pole tent with the heaters going hard against the October cold. It smelled like coffee and canvas and the diesel from the generators. I went through the line, took my eggs and walked toward the back. On the way I passed a knot of 3 lieutenants I had pulled up from line companies for staff work, men who had spent 6 weeks at a desk and were starting to believe their own paperwork. One of them, a tall kid named Drain with a flushed face, was making a low joke about the woman at the staff table. I caught the tail of it. He was asking the other 2 whether anyone had told the captain that the nurse's tent was on the other side of the chow line. The 2 laughed, the laugh of men who think the joke is between them. Drain stood up as I came past, came to a sloppy version of attention and dropped the joke half finished. I let it go. I should not have let it go. I sat down 4 seats from Captain Velen. I did not introduce myself. I let the eggs go cold. I read the morning brief on a folded sheet and pretended she was not there the way a senior officer pretends, which is its own kind of insult. When Drain came past again with his tray, he stopped at her bench. He bent at the waist as if speaking to a child. He said, loud enough for me to hear, "Ma'am, the supply tent is back the other way." "I think someone steered you wrong." She set her fork down. She did not look up. She said, "I am where I am supposed to be, Lieutenant." Her voice was very quiet. Drain laughed. "Sweetheart, this is the operations mess. We work in here. Why don't you find your unit?" He put a hand on her shoulder. It was not a hard hand. It was a hand that did not belong there. The mess went quieter. She turned her head about an inch. She looked at the hand. She looked at Drain's face. She said, "Lieutenant, you have 3 seconds to remove your hand." She did not raise her voice. He removed it. He laughed again, the laugh you laugh when you have just touched a stove. He went back to his bench. I watched the whole thing from 4 seats away with my coffee cooling in my hand, and I did not stand up, and I did not say one word, and I will carry that until I am buried. Sergeant Major Brock came in then with the morning packet. He saw the captain, came to a sharp parade rest 2 feet from her bench and said, "Captain Velen, your bird is on the line. They are spinning up at 0740. She nodded once, took her tray and left without looking at Drain, without looking at me, without looking at any of us. Brock turned and walked his packet to my table. He set it down. He stood there a beat longer than a sergeant major usually stands. He said, in the voice he used for things he did not want junior ears to hear, "Sir, the captain is not augmentation." I looked up. He said, "She is the pilot Major Hale requested by name out of Bagram. Call sign Ash Saint." He let the word sit. "She is the A10 driver, sir. She was the one over the Korengal in 2009. She came in here on the supply rotation because she did not want a fuss. The bird on the line is hers." I did not know what to say. I knew the call sign. Every man at my rank knew the call sign Ash Saint. I had read the after action on the Korengal hold 3 times. I had quoted from it in a war college lecture. I had pictured a long-faced man twice her size flying that gun run the way a man pictures what he expects to picture. I sat there with my eggs cold and my mouth slightly open, and Brock did not press the moment. He just put the packet down and walked out. I did not finish my breakfast. I walked out into the cold high country sun and stood at the duckboards looking at the flight line. The A-10 was already on the apron, 2 crew chiefs walking the ordnance under the wings. The nose art was a small hand-painted crescent of ash on the cowl, no words. The army had cited her once quietly for the Korengal. I had read every page of the citation, and I had assumed the entire time the pilot was a man. I felt the bile rise in the back of my throat. The brief that morning was the Knelt Road convoy. A supply push to the small NATO post at Garsai Pass. 60 miles of bad track, 2 switchback climbs, 3 blind cuts. We had been pushing convoys up that road for 2 months and getting them through. The intel said the cell that had been hitting the southern road had not crossed the ridge. The intel was wrong. At 10:20, the lead Cougar took a deep-buried charge under the front axle in the second blind cut, just past a stand of mud brick ruins called the Sheep Wall. The blast threw the truck off the road and pinned the convoy in a horseshoe with rising ground on 3 sides. Small arms came down off the ridge inside of a minute. RPG fire opened up at 90 seconds. The convoy commander, a captain named Reese, came on the net with the call I had been dreading for 2 months. Troops in contact, 6 wounded, 1 Cougar burning, air requested, air requested, air requested. I was in the TOC by then, standing at the map table with the chief of staff and 3 watch officers and Brock. The Apache pair we had on call was 41 minutes out, refueling at the FARP. The fast movers were along 60 minutes. I had nothing in the basket but a single A-10 sitting hot on the halberd line because the morning escort had scrubbed. I knew whose A-10 it was. I felt the knowledge in my stomach like a swallowed stone. The radio said, "Halberd 6, this is Ash Saint, wheels up, 12 out from Garsai, request push." It was the voice from the mess. Quiet, no edge, no fear, just a question. The chief of staff looked at me. He had heard the mess hall story already. A base learns its rumors faster than its facts. He said very carefully, "General, do we want to wait on the Apache pair?" I looked at the map, the horseshoe, the sheep wall, the ridge. Reese's men were going to die in that horseshoe inside of 15 minutes if no one came. I keyed the mic myself. I said, "Ash Saint, Halberd 6, you are cleared in hot. Convoy is friendlies in the horseshoe at the sheep wall. Hostiles on the high ground, north and east ridges, estimated platoon plus. Mark your friendlies, eyes on, your discretion." She said, "Halberd 6, Ash Saint copies, eyes on in 4. She was on station in 3. I will tell you what she did because I owe her that, and because every gun camera frame is on file, and every man who came home off the Kalat Road that day has the same telling. She made one low pass, 120 feet off the deck, dragging her gun barrel along the north ridge, not firing, drawing the fire instead so she could see exactly where the muzzles winked. The cell on the ridge thought they had a single low pass to kill, and they showed her every position they had. She came around. She climbed to a working altitude. She rolled in. She fired her first burst, a clean 2-second pull, and the gun made the sound that gun makes, the sound a tearing sheet of canvas would make if the canvas were the size of a barn. The first burst took the East Ridge RPG team and the rock they were hiding behind. The second burst on the second pass walked the line of the North Ridge muzzle flashes from west to east, methodical as a man reading a book. The third pass, the ridge had begun to come apart and the survivors were running. She did not chase the runners. She came in over the horseshoe low and slow and put her airframe between Reese's burning Cougar and the last live machine gun on the eastern shoulder. The machine gun fired at her belly. We could hear the impacts on the open mic, 3 sharp metal coughs spaced like a hammer on a nailhead. She held her line, fired one more burst, and the gun stopped firing. She stayed on station 40 minutes after that. She watched the wounded move. She talked Reese onto a pickup point on the lee side of the sheep wall. She told him very calmly where the third charge was buried because she could see the disturbed earth from the air and he could not see it from the ground. She told the rotary medevac when it came exactly which side of the road to set down because the other side had not been cleared. She did not raise her voice once in any of it. When a single PKM opened up from a goat track none of us had marked, she rolled in cold and silenced it inside of 9 seconds. She did not call it. We saw it on the camera footage 2 days later. Reese told me later what it had looked like from the ground. The smell of the burning Cougar, the private in the back of the second truck, a kid named Hollies, bleeding from the thigh and gone quiet. When the A-10 first came over the ridge at 120 feet his men cheered, and then it did not fire, and they thought it was hit, and then it climbed and came around and they understood she had been counting muzzles. He had never seen a gun run that careful. When she put the airframe between the burning Cougar and the last gun she was so low he could see the paint chips on the underside of her wing. He stood up in the open and waved at her belly. He said he did not know why he did it. It was the only thing his body knew to do. The medic in the second truck, a specialist named Hayek, told me a piece of it I did not learn for a month. He said Hollies had gone gray in the face and stopped breathing for about 11 seconds. Hayek was working a chest seal he did not need because his hands had to keep moving. When the A-10 came back over low and put itself between them and the eastern gun, the wind off her airframe blew the canvas back and the sun came in on Hollies' face. Hollies took a breath and then another. The captain had not been just covering the convoy, she had been holding the air over a single dying boy. Hollis was 19. He went home on the medevac with both legs. He is 40 years old now, with 3 children, and he sends me a Christmas card every year that I do not deserve. When she came back to the line at Halbert, her airframe had 19 holes in it, 2 through the canopy 6 inches behind her head, and 1 through the left engine cowling that should have written off the engine and did not. She landed the bird, taxied it to the revetment, climbed down and walked to the operations tent to write her report. The men on the apron stood as she passed. None of them had been told to. The 2 crew chiefs walked her bird in, counted the holes out loud, one by one, and stopped at 15 because they did not trust their own voices. I met her at the door. I was in my service blouse with the star on the shoulder. I was 61 years old, a brigadier general of the United States Army, with 37 years of service and 2 combat tours of my own, and I did not know what to do with my hands. I said, "Captain Velen." She said, "Sir." I said, 21 men came home off the Calais road today because of you. Reese says you put yourself between his wounded and the last gun. Is that accurate? She said, "It was the cleanest angle, sir." I stood there in the door of the operations tent in front of Brock, and the chief of staff and 4 watch officers and the captain of the Apache pair, who had finally arrived and had heard the whole thing on the open net coming in. I thought of the mess hall and Drain's hand on her shoulder and the staff officers who had moved themselves 2 benches down, and the way I had let my eggs go cold and said nothing. I thought of my grandfather who had served at the Bulge as a corporal and had told me once, when I was 9 years old and shining his shoes for a parade, that an officer is only as good as the smallest soldier he is willing to see. I had not seen her in the mess. I had seen a uniform a size too large and a face I assumed was a child's. I went down on one knee in front of her. I am not ashamed of it. I went down on one knee in the dust at the door of the operations tent in front of my own staff, and I said, "Captain Velen, on behalf of my command, I owe you an apology I cannot pay and the thanks of 21 men I can." I did not get up until she said, "Please stand, sir." Her voice was the same quiet it had been in the mess hall. The Apache pilot saluted her first, then the chief of staff, then Brock, then the watch officers one by one, then me. We held the salute longer than the manual asks for. She returned it once clean, the way a person returns a salute when they have done it 10,000 times. Then she went into the tent and she wrote her report. She wrote it in 3 pages by hand in pencil. She did not put her own name in the action paragraph. She put Reese's name and Hollis's and the medevac pilot's, and the names of the 2 crew chiefs at Bagram who had turned her bird in under 18 minutes the night before. The action paragraph credited the convoy. She signed the bottom, Velen, M, Captain, and slid the report across to the duty officer without looking up. Lieutenant Drain came to my office that afternoon without being summoned. He stood at attention in front of my desk a long while. He did not try to explain himself. I did not let him. I had him on a transport back to a line company at sundown, and his evaluation reflected the morning in the mess. I heard, years on, that he kept a photograph of an A-10 nose art on the bulkhead above his bunk in every unit he served with, and that he never said why. I made Captain Velen my deputy for the Calais sector inside of a week, over the objection of 2 colonels who outranked her. The chief of staff asked me in private, "Why a captain?" I said because she was the best officer on the base and we both knew it. He nodded and never raised it again. She ran that sector for the next 9 months. We did not lose a convoy, not one. She redrew the route off the Calais in the 2nd week, and instituted a low-pass reconnaissance pattern on every blind cut that the Apache pilots adopted across the theater inside of 6 months. The colonel who took my chair told me, the night I rotated out, that he had served 31 years and had never met an officer who refused credit the way she did. The dog tag in my drawer is the one she gave me the day I rotated out. She unhooked the chain in the operations tent in front of Brock and no one else, and she put it in my hand and she said, "Sir, this is the only thing of mine I want you to keep. I do not need it anymore, you might." The chain broke when I closed my hand on it. The edge was already scorched from the day at the sheep wall. I am an old man now, and I have spent 10 years learning to live with the morning I let a lieutenant put his hand on the shoulder of the best pilot in my command and said nothing. There is no clean way to live with it. There is only the tag in the drawer and the 17th of October and the truth, which is that the army I served, the country I served, the men I commanded, all of us were defended that day by a small woman with steady gray eyes whom I called the kid before I knew enough to be ashamed. The tag is the closest I will ever come to making it right. I take it out, I hold it, I put it back. And I remember that when the radio cracked and the convoy was burning and there was nothing in my basket but her, she said one word to me. She said copies, and she went.